Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road Podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and joining me for today's show as my guest host is our in house ancient demonologist, Mr. JJ from the Southern Demonology Podcast.
Woohoo!
Glad to have you back on, JJ.
Good to be here as always. In fact, in the very last episode that I did, which was the season finale of season 5, which was lucky number 13. Hopefully, no one out there is suffering from triskaidekaphobia. I announced that I now have, for my own podcast, two different people that are no longer considered guests. They're just now regular contributors. One of them is our dear friend, Father Michael Birdsong. And the other one, I'm not sure if you know who it is or not. It's this loser named Chris from TWR. I don't, yeah. Oh, it's you. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right.
Asshole. But for today's show, we want to talk about, we kind of just came up with this on the fly. I messaged you. Actually, I think I called you the other day. I just had this freaking idea pop up in my head, which kind of happens all the time. And then I and then I call like JJ, call me. And I'm like, what about this for a podcast episode? And you're like, let's do it. So here we are. So the topic of today is going to be around the concept of the devil made me do it. And I'm not talking about the movie with The Conjuring, even though I like the Conjuring series and I thought that movie was okay. We may refer to that case every now and then. May refer to other cases while we are going through this episode. But I was talking to JJ and I was like, dude, I want to explore the concept of people blaming the devil for doing heinous things and just exploring that concept in general with regards to demonology. Like we've had quite a few demonology episodes. So I think this is a good time to talk about that concept.
First, I will say that that particular movie in The Conjuring, I actually enjoyed the Conjuring series a great deal. And the only bad ones have been the first Annabelle, which was horrendous.
Oh,
All
come
of
on. I like the Annabelle movie.
No, the second one was actually okay. I still remember my wife gripping my arm with a death grip. I'm surprised I still have it while we watched that movie in the
It,
theaters.
which one are you talking about? Are you talking? I like the one where the family lives in the apartment complex and she sees that like Baphomet looking goat thing chasing her and the baby.
I don't remember which one. I just know it was the second movie that was okay, and the first one was just awful. And then, of course, both of the Nun movies and the spinoff were horrible. And then, in terms of the main Conjuring line of movies, it was definitely The Devil Made Me Do It one that was just awful, absolutely awful. But that is neither here nor there.
So, JJ, I'm going to punt it to you first. What are your thoughts on the entire concept of people blaming the devil for committing crimes, heinous acts, or just, acting strange? Is that something you've seen in your studies about demonology in general?
If a person is genuinely possessed, then they, for brief moments, all the way up to almost permanently, have no idea what they are doing. And that is because they have allowed an entity to bypass their free will and essentially take control of the body. However, in those very rare, very extreme circumstances, that person no longer acts like the individual that they are. They are completely replaced by something that has never been human. And if you've ever seen the movie Nefarious, then I think that that's a pretty good idea of the radical shift in personality that takes place. And if a person is undergoing demonic possession, they're not going to miraculously come out of it. It takes a direct intercession from God and a priest in order to do so. B, that individual is no longer that individual. So they would have to say that it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's either the demon that is in the pilot seat or it's not. And in all of these cases, it's not. And there seems to be a severe mix up between oppression and possession in these cases. Like in the Conjuring movie, it was a clear sign of possession. But for all of these other types of serial killers, they're just saying, "Oh, well, I was talking and, I heard these voices and they told me to do this. And so I had to go do that." No, you didn't have to go do that. It's just a bloody excuse. It's not possession. The devil didn't make you do it. You wanted to do it and you're trying to find a convenient excuse to get out of it. There's a really severe difference between that.
What if someone says, like, for example, Son of Sam, this dude in New York in the 70s, the late 70s, he was involved in a series of shootings, killing 6 people, wounding a bunch of other people. And he said that a demon named Sam was talking through his neighbor's dog, telling him to kill people. Now, I don't know how far demonic possession goes. I know in that really crappy movie that you hate called The Pope's Exorcist, they kind of put the demon in a pig and they blasted it with a shotgun. Bible, Jesus cast legion into what was it, a herd of pigs or hogs or something of that sort, and
Yep.
they jumped off the cliff. Now, when it comes to, now, I don't mean to like break off, but I think it's relevant. Animal possession. I can't say if that's a frequent thing. Like from my understanding, it seems like a demon has to be cast into an animal in order for it to be possessed. So therefore, you get what I'm trying to say? Like with trying to use the Son of Sam example, he's trying to say that the neighbor's dog was possessed by a demon, which told him to do whatever the hell he did.
Theoretically, could a demon speak through an animal? I don't see why not. Would a demon possess an animal willingly? I severely doubt that. They are driven out of a urge to putrefy and to corrupt the creations of God. And I
I mean,
don't really
animals are that, aren't they?
yeah, but it's not Jesus did not Christ did not become an animal. He became a human. And that is their target as a result.
Sure. Yeah.
So and in fact, just as you pointed out, one legion is cast into a herd of pigs. So it didn't choose to go there, it was forced to go there. And two, in the Pope's Exorcist, that was in the beginning of the movie when the priest was proving that the individual that was quote unquote possessed actually wasn't possessed at all.
What do you
It,
mean?
it was a trick to get the person to realize that the priest knew that he was full of shit.
But they shot the pig.
Yeah, they did, but that it still
Kind of
doesn't
fucked
just
up.
that whole movie is just horrible. Can I just say that the hero of that movie is the Vespa that toted Russell Crowe's fat ass around? The fact that it did not buckle under his weight is kind of a miracle. And I'm a big guy myself. I'm not making fun of of anyone who happens to be overweight. I am myself, but yeah, that movie was just all kinds of ridiculous.
Yeah, but going back to the animal thing, like humans, they have dogs, we have all other types of animals that are domesticated that we hold dear to us.
Oh yeah, I
I
have
would
two
just
myself, and
yeah, I
they
just
are my
think
babies.
yeah, I just think of a type of situation where maybe that could be a possibility in the sense that, you know what, maybe it's not ideal, but I know I could get to this guy. I can't get to him directly, but I know he likes dogs. A neighbor has a dog. If I take over this dog temporarily and tell him to do stuff, maybe that could work. Is that a little far fetched, or am I like completely just pulling this out of my ass to you?
Okay, if it was his own dog that he cherished dearly,
Sure.
maybe I could see that that could be a legitimate avenue. But even if that's the case, even if you hear an animal telling you to do something, it doesn't mean that you are then compelled to do it.
I'm sorry, buddy. I can't get you a cheeseburger.
It yeah, it's not dinner time. No. It's very easy. You ignore it or you go about your day. This is an absolutely clear-cut case of not demonic obsession or oppression, but rather just being bonkers.
Or some sort of illness, right? More like
He
some
had
sort of
a
like
severe mental illness, yes.
yeah, some
Some
schizophrenia or
type of
something like that.
psychoses.
Yeah, you find when did a little bit of research just on the concept of, people being possessed and people blaming the devil, et cetera, they tend to have schizophrenia, undiagnosed schizophrenia. I wonder how many times throughout history, you have a case of where someone blames the devil for whatever X person's behavior. Oh, we cast this guy out of the village because he's possessed by the devil and he acts like a feral beast. I wonder how many times throughout history someone had some sort of undiagnosed mental illness and the devil was quote unquote blamed for their actions because people just didn't know better at the time.
So I would say that A, that's highly likely, but two, on the I always do that. Instead of saying A and B or one and two, I'll go a letter and then a number and then a letter. I don't know why my brain does that. Anyway, one of the things in when I was in college and we were studying this stuff that a lot of my friends and I would kind of sit around and ruminate about is how many people are in mental illness asylums that are suffering from some sort of demonic oppression or possession. And it's people simply refuse to recognize that fact. So I think it can go both ways. Now, the situation I described would be admittedly much more rare, but I would always be curious because there is no entry in the DSM for possession or demonic influence whatsoever.
So anyone listening to this that's like a medieval scholar or is well versed when it comes to medieval mystics and all that type of stuff. Are you familiar with any of those, JJ? Have you heard of them? Christina the Astonishing and people like that?
No, I've done some research into magicians that
Mm,
were in medieval times that would, actually go through purification rituals and study grimoires and attempt to cast all kinds of different magics, but that's as far as my knowledge goes.
gotcha. So essentially, long story short, Christina the Astonishing is, well, she's a saint now, and she lived from 1150 to 1224. And it's been a while since I actually discussed Christina the Astonishing because I did have an actual academic course that talked about female mystics and mysticism in medieval Europe. And you come to the other side of it, in which I don't want to say they're like possessed by God, but they can do like unnatural things where she'll live off of her breast milk and like contort and twist in different ways types of thing. What are your thoughts on that in general? I know you said you haven't like studied or looked into them, but just based off of that, the kind of mysticism back in the day that are now some of them are saints, like Christina the Astonishing. If you ever get a chance, JJ, look her up. Listeners, if you don't know who that is, look that up as well. At one point, she was suspected of being possessed because she would dress in rags and she renounced all life's comforts. It was just strange at the time. Maybe she had some sort of mental illness. But what are your thoughts on the other side of it? People being, claiming to be, I don't want to say possessed by God, because I feel like that's the wrong way of saying it. You get what I'm trying to say? Where there's people that are venerated.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So people that are venerated that are similar to Christina the Astonishing, in which they behave in some sort of manner that, one could potentially accuse them of being possessed. Like, what are your thoughts on that type of situation? I'm sure I explained that terribly.
No, no, you didn't. And I honestly don't know. Like, it would be a pretty rare occurrence. In order for that to come down as being a legitimate case of being touched by the divine, then I would say that person has to exhibit supernatural qualities because it's, if you're touched by the infernal, then you would display preternatural qualities, and that's because a demon is locked to either time or place or person. However, the supernatural, and that includes the divine, is not whatsoever. So they would have to exhibit some pretty amazing qualities in order to distinguish that from mental illness.
I have some examples of what she did, and I
Go
could
for it.
let you judge for yourself. And I am not trying to blaspheme anyone that's listening to this.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I am, in my comment earlier, I am not ever making light of mental psychoses or mental illness by any stretch of the word.
Right, same here. So, some of the miracles that are attributed to Christina the Astonishing is that she would throw herself into fires and emerge unharmed, and she claimed to do that to suffer the pain of others in purgatory. She would submerge herself in freezing rivers for a long period of time without coming out without being harmed. She would allow herself to be mauled by dogs without showing signs of injury, and she would climb into ovens filled with burning flames without being burned. Further shocking witnesses.
If I saw any of those things happen, I would probably be convinced myself
Yeah. Convinced in what? In what? What
that,
specifically? Because to me, there is, how they say there's a thin line between genius and insanity?
yes.
To me, this is a thin line between demonic possession and being, I don't even know what the term is.
Well, if she kept the word of God in her mouth,
Uh huh.
if she could stand to be around religious artifacts, if she could speak the name of Christ and God in a loving fashion, then that kind of proves out the preternatural path, I guess you could say.
Okay. No, that would make sense.
If she was doing all of this stuff in terms of, oh, just look at me, if it was trying to glorify herself, then I would start to say, those are probably parlor tricks of some fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know how putting yourself in an oven
Dude,
is a
I
trick.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't mean to derail the conversation away from the demonic.
No, examining both sides of the coin, always a valid thing. And if you can come up with some ground rules for one, then that would also apply to the flip. So I don't think that was a derailment whatsoever.
Okay, yeah, just making sure, you know. Let's go to the number 1 case of the devil made me do it. And that is the murder of Alan Bono by Arne Johnson in 1981. So, the reason why this is so popular is because this is from the Warrens case files. I don't know what your thoughts are on the Warrens.
Well, let me put it this way. Growing up, I would hear my mom tell me about the Amityville case. And as a kid who was obsessed with ghost stories, I would have her tell that to me over and over again. And that is how I first came to know about the Warren. And then it was only much later in life did I start to learn about things weren't nearly as black and white. These things didn't really occur in the as depicted in the original movie. It was a lot more problematic. Then, after reading the Warrens book, or at least the first part of the Warrens book called The Demonologist, after reading the prologue where Ed Warren describes this demonic force roaring forth and pouring through the hallways, I threw the book down because I'm like, no, that is absolute bullshit. I didn't believe a goddamn thing about it. And at that point, I came to know that I would imagine that they dramatically inflated and probably caused some of the cases in which they are so famous for doing. Now, I would say that I'll be charitable and say that in the beginning, they probably were doing this to help people, but by the end, they were only out for themselves and the fame. So, it being a Warren's case automatically makes it a heck of a lot more problematic than it should be, in my opinion.
No, I concur. I was really big into the Warrens like 7 years ago. Between like 2016 and 2018, I was super into the Warrens and their case files. I've read a few of their books about their cases, and this one always intrigued me. So basically, to give the cliff notes of it, in 1980, an 11-year-old David Glatzel, who's the younger brother of Arnie Johnson's girlfriend Debbie, started having and strange behavior. He said to that he was tormented by an old man. So what does the family do? They call in Ed and Lorraine. The Warrens conclude, hey, David is possessed by multiple demons, and they consult with the Catholic Church. They try to exorcise the boy. And during one of the sessions, Arnie Johnson, who was there, did something you shouldn't have done, challenged a demon, and basically challenged one of them to take him instead of, harassing a child. So we fast forward to 1981 in February 16th. Arnie stabs his landlord, Alan Bono, during a violent altercation. Apparently, alcohol was involved. So he stabs him up, and apparently he's found like 2 miles down the road by like police and emergency services. and he has no recollection of what's going on. The Apparently the Warrens get involved, and this goes to trial. Everything, they're trying to, give him life in prison or whatever, and the Warrens pull out an ace and say, well, this was done by the devil. The devil made him do it. This goes back to the one podcast that we did. I think this was prior to your last episode, where we did, what was it, Demonology 102? Demons are not responsible for everything.
Yep.
This brings me back to that. I feel like this is an expansion of that conversation that we had.
I would thoroughly agree with you on that one.
Because, and listeners, if you have not listened to that, that one is exclusively on Southern Demonology as one of JJ's episodes. So go check that out. It's called Demonology 102. So with this whole type of situation and trying to put the devil on trial, I just don't understand how anyone can think that's a good idea. Like, how can you prove that? How can you prove without a doubt that someone is actually possessed? And by them being possessed, they commit a crime, and then they use that as an excuse, as their defense. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't. I mean, it's another one of it's the same thing as a person who claims insanity or temporary insanity as a plea. You can't prove it. The only thing that you can do is be examined by mental health professionals. They render their judgments, and then that is then taken into consideration by the court. But you still can't point out and go, oh, yeah, that person is definitely suffering from some type of psychosis. And so we're going to grant that plea. You can only trust, you can only really take in what you can see and then what the experts tell you is going on. And if you try to do that in this particular case, who can you depend upon? Yes, you can go to mental health professionals, but then you would have to bring in priests in order to make a claim one way or the other. It's just tricky. And if a person is truly possessed, then they wouldn't be in their right mind to even be able to stand for trial. So I don't see how any of that could ever work.
Let's take this example. Let's do a complete 180 because we've been completely logical throughout this entire episode. Fall from grace, Adam and Eve. They eat the apple or the forbidden fruit of knowledge. They fall from grace. They're cast out of the garden, and Satan is responsible for tempting them and doing all this stuff.
So that brings up an interesting idea that the infernal is there as a source of temptation and corruption. However, I'm going to point out what Father Mike recently said when he was talking about this particular, and I'm just going to call it a parable, that the enemy did not directly control the actions of humanity that day. It rather just put forth some seemingly logical questions. Well, God didn't say you were going to die, did he? The snake did not put the apple in her hand and then force her to eat it. It just put out a suggestion and then backed it up with some logic. So, and that's kind of the point. Even if there is a demon whispering in your ear, there is nothing that says that you have to go along with those suggestions. It is still the individual's choice to do so.
No, that makes sense. And what I was trying to articulate earlier before I lost my train of thought was that we acknowledge that the enemy is there. We acknowledge that the enemy attacks us spiritually, likes to possess people if they can. They like to influence our lives. What I was trying to get at was, there's always the concept, there's always free will. I understand that. But why are they kind of absolved if someone claims they were indirectly influenced by a demon or the devil to do something? If you view it in this manner, there's kind of like a hierarchy, right? With regards, let's do power levels, right?
Power level 9,000.
I
Sorry.
know, 9,000 Sparking 0 kicks ass. But, let's go by power levels. Humans are on the low power level scale. Demons who are fallen angels and angels, there's angels, then there's demons on the power level scale. When it comes to crime and stuff like that, and I know this is kind of like a taboo question, and in no shape or form am I trying to justify using demons as a reason to commit for someone to commit a crime. Why is that immediately thrown out? Because you could have, for example, let's say for some whatever reason you become a judge. You drop being an architect and your developmental stuff and your podcast, and you're like, I'm fast tracking to be a judge. And I know you as a person, you are a Catholic. But then you go into a court case, someone beat the crap out of another person and they blame the devil. Why would at that point your faith, I want to say your faith stops there. You get what I mean? Like why are certain things barriers when it comes to the supernatural and faith and our reality, if that makes sense.
I'm not quite sure what you're trying to get at in terms of the question.
So what I'm trying to say is my
I'm not
question
trying
is
to be obtuse or dense, I promise.
no, no, no. My question is, let's say you have that example of a court case, you're a judge, you're a devout Catholic.
Mhm.
Person comes in, says, "I beat the crap out of my neighbor because I had a demon telling me to do it." And you're like, "You know what? You're full of shit. You're going 10 years in prison." What makes a person not believe that that was an action or influence of a demon? Whereas in our regular life, we are ready to accept hauntings, intercession of angels, gods, saints, etc. You get what I mean?
I do, but it still boils down to the same exact point. If I was the judge sitting in judgment for said individual, I would simply point out that doesn't matter who told you to do what. It could have been a demon, it could have been your father, it could have been a random person on the street urging you to go do whatever violent action has landed you in front of me. It doesn't mean that you are then contractually obligated to go forth and do the harm that you did. You are the one who still pulled the trigger. The only way that you could ever try to claim that you weren't in control of your actions as if that individual was possessed. There's one other interesting possibility that we haven't brought up that's even much more rare, which is if a person is perfectly possessed, they are then an amalgamation of their own will and the enemy's will. So they would still be in control of their action. But even that wouldn't be so that if you're being a target of obsession, you're in charge. If you're a target of oppression, you're in charge. It's only if you are possessed would you maybe not be in charge, and then if you're perfectly possessed, you're still in charge.
So either way, you're screwed.
Yeah, and honestly, at that point in time, you're much more likely to be able um, to at least escape some measure of punishment is if you claim mental instability more so than if you tried to claim the, active work of the devil.
Did my questioning make sense? I feel like I kinda
No, no, no. It
flip-flopped
made
all over the
sense.
place there.
I completely understood the premise of what you were getting at, but it was just the actual question itself. I was a little unsure as to what you were driving toward. But no,
Gotcha.
you made sense.
Yeah, because the only thing I really think about is, like, let's say something happens, some sort of thing happens to you that's positive. Most people will be like, "Oh, God blessed you," or something like that. You notice we never say, like, when something bad happens to you, it's like, "Oh, devil fucked you over, dude. He's fucking with you. Why'd you do that?" You know what I mean? So, I was just trying to understand, like, the balance of that because to put it in the simplest way I could possibly put it, it seems like we are quick to accept faith and supernatural occurrences when they are positive. No questions asked. Well, you and I are cynical assholes, so we will ask questions. But but
Accurate.
yeah, but it's like there's certain things like was like, "Oh no, 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 that's too far because it doesn't align perfectly with what I believe."
Well, it's because when it comes to the positive or the divine, or even with hauntings, there's nothing that's going to override your free will. It would only be a matter of direct possession that could do that. And there are Father Birdsong and I just recently did recorded an episode of Ending the Curse where we went back and was examining a lot of the cases in which people were claiming it wasn't this exact topic, but it was the phenomenon that would happen, especially during the satanic panic of the 80s, where people were making up a demon for everything. And he was telling the story. I mean, we both were telling some pretty pretty funny anecdotes where this one person he put a quarter into the Coke machine just to date ourselves even more than what I do now, and the Coke machine took his money, and then he said, "Oh, a demon took my money," and then laid his hands on the Coke machine to try to get his money back.
That dude had to pay Charon to get across to the other side. Maybe he was short on funds.
It's just, it's absolutely ridiculous. It is. That is nothing more than a case of abandoning your own responsibility and sacrificing accountability to some made up thing. If you're lusting after your neighbor's wife, it's not because of a demon, it's because it's you. It's very easy. And there's already so many different avenues. I mean, people do this all the time. It's not, and it doesn't have to be chalked up to a demon. People attempt to minimize their own accountability continuously because it's hard. It's hard to accept that you may have done wrong. And it's hard to be the villain and the only worldview that you have, which is your own.
There's one more case that it's not necessarily a devil made me do it type of case, but more so, you ever hear of the haunting in Connecticut, the
Yes.
Snedeker haunting? Whereas the one kid, their son has cancer and there's an evil entity in the home, which used to be a funeral home apparently, and whatever evil entity or demon like influences this kid to do bad things, like to act up and, essentially be a little asshole.
Mhm.
Now, at that point, is it still the fault of the child in that situation? Or is this legitimately a kind of demon or devil made me do it type of case due to his physical state with being plagued with with a life-threatening illness? At what point could we say that that excuse is valid?
Well, there's just so many complicating factors involved.
Damn, I thought I stumped the Harvard educated
No,
demonologist.
I'm not saying I have a great answer to it, but so it's the the age of the person and trying to determine culpability in the younger is always a tough act to follow, no matter what may be going on. Layer that in with the unfairness of suffering from a terminal disease. And then you throw in possible outside influence into that mix. I mean, I still have to say that the kid was not possessed. He still had a free will. And it doesn't matter how eroded that will could have been. That was still his conscious choice to be a little asshole. So it still doesn't absolve him of anything. You may come to sympathize more, but that doesn't get you the get out of jail free card, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does make sense. Man, you're a tough one.
I'm a bastard. What can I say?
Damn, I gave you a kid with cancer being attacked by a demon. That's still ain't good enough.
No, I mean, do I have sympathy for that? Absolutely, I do. Does it? Yeah. Does it mean absolvement? No, no, it does
No.
not.
No, I completely get it as well. It's very difficult in these types of situations because you look at all of these cases, and in recent memory, you've had kids kill their own parents. And in the aftermath, they blame it on the devil or a demon.
Can
So,
I tell you the saddest story that I know that
yeah.
actually happened to a friend of mine?
Yes.
It's in the same vein, so it's
Okay.
not completely off topic. When I was in high school, I did both extemporaneous speaking and Lincoln Douglas debate, and I loved it. Every single weekend, we would go off to various tournaments, and I would do one of these two events without fail. And when I was doing extemp, there was another guy who happened to be from um, Livingston, Tennessee, which was like 2.5 hours away. So he wasn't close by any stretch of the word, but he was a tall, lanky, very lanky guy, but ultimate nerd, really friendly, and we became friends. And between our junior and senior year in high school, the state of Tennessee has a thing called Governor's School. And it's just a program where for a month you go off and you choose a specialty. And I chose humanities. And you go to one of the UT campuses and you spend a month and you get to do deep dives into whatever particular topic that you chose. And come to find out, he was there and he was actually living right across the hall from me. And because we already knew each other from doing extemp together, we became fast friends. And I noticed that loved to tell lies. Not horrible ones, but just ones that made himself sound better to himself, that made him more important than what he actually was. They were innocent in the long run. He wasn't trying to get out of handling accountability. He just wanted, I don't know if he was trying to impress other people to make more friends or what the case may be, but I think we've all known these individuals who will just default to lies in order to get attention. After we finished governor's school, he would still write like 20, 30-page letters to me. And we would sit there and correspond, and, it was fine. And then he went off to college, and I went off to college. And it was during the summer break between freshman and sophomore year. I was at home. I was working as a mover where we were working 14 hours a day, moving everything ever created by humanity. I was exhausted. I had come home around like 9 o'clock at night, threw myself on the couch, and had essentially fallen asleep until my mom woke me up. This is going somewhere, I swear to God, and said, "Oh, hey, there's a news story about your friend." I'm like, What friend?" I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" Come to find out, his little penchant for lying earned him a great deal of enemies at that school. He did not like it, and he did not want to go back. And his parents insisted that yes, you will go back because we're paying a shitload of money for it. And so one night he drove home late, parked his car about 2 blocks away from where he lived, walked into his house silently, took a gun, and shot his mom, his dad, and his little sister. The dad, I think, lived. The other two did not. And I don't care what excuse you have, whether he would say the devil made me do it, whether he would say I just didn't want to go back. It was still his choice to pull that trigger, not once, not twice, but 3 different times, and to rob two people most dear to him of their lives and cause irreparable harm to the third. And I just don't think that there could ever be any excuse for those kinds of actions.
I am inclined to agree with you. Thank you for sharing that.
Because I spent all summer with this boy living right across the hall from me. We hung out constantly. I still remember playing video games with him in the lounge. He was, I thought, a good guy. And for someone who I thought was like that, to be able to turn around in a moment of ultimate selfishness and do something like that is it's just mind-boggling. I couldn't even begin to imagine what it would take for someone to do such a heinous.
Right. And I would say no amount of devil made me do it. I was influenced by a demon could ever absolve someone responsibility of that type of action.
I'm related to some very evil people. My grandfather, for example, oh my God, my grandfather. He was a preacher who committed some of the most heinous actions. He killed an uncle. He did unspeakable things to other family members. He was the epitome of human evil. But at the end of the day, those are all still his actions. And I hope that he is burning.
Well, folks, I think we will end the show on that note. JJ, I think those stories that you just shared convey the point very well that the devil making you do it, a demon making you do it, or claiming a dog talking to you making you do it will never be a valid excuse because at the end of the day, it is still your actions and you have to carry out those actions. At any point in those situations, whether it be your grandfather or your former friend that is now in prison, had the choice not to. Doesn't matter what influenced them, doesn't matter the reasoning. They always had the choice to not do it. And
Exactly.
and folks, the devil making people do it is not a valid excuse for being a terrible person. With that being said, this is going to be a joint release between my show, The Wandering Road, and JJ show, Southern Demonology. So for my listeners, JJ, where can the people find you?
You can actually visit our newly revised website, which is southerndemonology.com. And there you can get access to all of my social links, contact information, and play episodes as soon as they were released. You can find us on pretty much every social media platform besides Twitter, and especially on YouTube and TikTok and quite a few others. But Southern Demonology is a podcast that's been around since 2017. I am on every single podcasting platform that I think exists out there. So please feel free to find us, write me, comment, like, do whatever you can to help the show. I would greatly appreciate it. And for my listeners, Chris, where can they find you?
You can find The Wandering Road on all podcast streaming platforms. So that's Apple, Spotify, Deezer, whatever you use to consume your podcast media. If you want to get a hold of us, we do have a contact email address of twroadpodcast@gmail.com. We love to speak with the community. We love to hear paranormal stories. We love to hear cryptid stories. So if you want to be on the show and you have some haunting experience that you want to share, by all means, please reach out to us. We've had quite a few folks reach out to us in the past few months, and we've had them on the show. It's been a blast. So I always encourage the community to interact with us. We are very open minded. So when you come on our show, I like to call it the paranormal safe space. You are not going to be judged. We're not going to question anything that you went through. We're not going to make fun of you. That is not the type of show that we have. We think everybody that has a paranormal experience or a strange occurrence, I think their experiences are valid and everyone deserves a chance to share what they went through, like I did on your show, JJ, a while back when I first came on, and other shows that I've been on. And also, we are on social media. We are on Instagram at TW Road Podcast, and we are also on TikTok at TWR Podcast. And I would say those are the two main places that we frequent when it comes to social media. We do have a Facebook group, so if you search The Wandering Road, you can go ahead and join that group as well.
But I think that going to what you were saying before, Chris, you're in the same boat that I am. You're not there for gotcha media. You're not there to make people feel uncomfortable. It's the exact opposite. You're there to make people feel relaxed, calm, and just to have a good discussion. And I do the same thing on Southern Demonology. Those are always my overwhelming priorities when I'm talking to someone.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.